Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Always Learning. My name is Laraine McKinnon. I'm a talent and culture strategist with Emtrain, and today's guest is Ivy Walker. She is the co-founder and CEO of Helios Digital Learning. Her organization uses storytelling to compel more ethical behaviors at Fortune 500 firms. Welcome, Ivy.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Laraine. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, as am I. I love that we met because our organizations are so incredibly aligned. We're both using storytelling to improve behaviors and workplace culture in and around the corporate compliance ecosystem. At Emtrain, we're using second person and third person storytelling. What you're doing is using first person storytelling. I'd love to hear a little bit about how that first person storytelling works and what is it about storytelling that you find drives behavior change?
Yeah, so, storytelling is this wonderful tool, as you know, because you guys are using it in the form that you're using it. But it's a wonderful tool that lowers the barriers in individuals' minds in terms of being receptive to whatever information that you want them to think about. All the science shows that when I tell you a story, the same areas in my brain that are lighting up as I'm telling you the story are lighting up in your brain. So we're having a shared experience and you're really living the story that I'm telling you. So it makes it all that much more relatable. For us, when it comes to first person stories, we identify people who have really compelling experiences. They could be positive experiences where they faced an ethical dilemma and made the right choice, or they could be negative experiences where they faced an ethical dilemma and they made the wrong choice. But what we always look for in a first person storyteller is that the story itself, the individual themselves, they reflect you, they reflect me. So we're never going to sit down with a Bernie Madoff, right? Because none of us will have that chance of fleecing billions from thousands of people. But we will be placed in a range of other situations that, but for that experience itself, we may not think about how we'll respond when the pressure is on us to keep our job or to perform to meet a certain standard or whatever it might be. I actually, years ago, I wrote a piece called The Felon Within All of Us. And I got this particular response from a professor who wrote back to me and said, maybe you're a felon, but I'm not a felon. There's no felon in me. And so he and I actually had a conversation. And what I said to him, I said, is what we all have to realize is that there is a line for every person. And the better you are at self-awareness, the more that you understand what that line is, the better you are in avoiding making the wrong decision. So we look for those stories where the person is an average everyday individual who's striving for better, parent, church member, community member, and they get caught up in a situation and they make the wrong decision.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We do a lot of this through workplace video scenes where we're showing these things unfold and trying to help people put themselves in the other person's shoes or imagine their own, what would they do in the same situation? And I think there's something about that awareness and almost getting a preview of a situation that you might be in and getting to think through what you would do when it happened that makes you better prepared when the situation starts to unfold for you. Yeah, there's definitely something there.
And there's a thing to think about there, Laraine, which is, again, going back to the science, when your brain rehearses something, there's no difference between whether or not you actually lived it or you rehearsed it because you were immersed in a good story, right? It's the same sort of learning dynamic in either situation. And so that's what we look to do. And we do it through an interesting story where you can look at somebody else and say, I relate to that person and I could see myself in that situation.
Mm-hmm. So you told me a story the other day that I would love for you to share. It's about the largest municipal fraud in America.
Yes.
And, why don't you go ahead and tell it now, because it brings this average everyday person who comes through a dilemma. Why don't you tell that?
Yeah, so we have a documentary called All the Queen's Horses that we produced and released a couple years ago. And it's about the largest municipal fraud in U.S. history, as you mentioned, which happened in a tiny town in Dixon, Illinois, a town of about 15, 16,000 people, where the comptroller stole $53 million over 20 years and no one noticed. And that's really what the story is. The story is not so much about the comptroller stealing nearly the entire annual budget, right? So by the time she got caught, she was stealing nearly the entire annual budget. That individual is not somebody you'll ever see yourself in, but it was the people around her who missed this very obvious thing that you may see yourself in, because what she was really good at, her name was Rita Crunwell, what she was really good at was social engineering. She was really good at manipulating people into feeling like she was honest and trustworthy. People succumb to their own biases. Hey, I know Rita. I've known Rita her whole life. She grew up in this town. And one of the city council members said, Rita is so good at her job, she treats the town's money like it's her own. And that's exactly what she was doing. It's literally what she was doing, right? But it was the personal biases that people allowed to get in their way. So they didn't ask basic questions. They didn't ask, why are these numbers so askew? And it wasn't just the town council or the citizens, it was the audit firm as well. They had a national audit firm working on their audit that missed obvious cues, again, because of personal relationships, willful blindness in that case. And it's something that we're all subject to. So even in a story like that, where you won't see yourself in the antagonist, you will see yourself in all of those people who played a role in the willful blindness that allowed that to go on for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it may start small, and it may escalate to some degree, right? The things that, just you don't even notice, and then the things that you notice, but you discount,
yes,
or you explain away yourself, and you never ask the question because, boy, that would seem a little bit, maybe she would take offense to it, or it would
absolutely.
seem rude. And so there's the social politeness, and then there's the like me bias and the confirmation bias of what I expect is what I see.
Exactly.
What else comes out for you behaviorally there?
So the other thing to think about is, in particular, you mentioned the confirmation of the like me bias. Social confrontation is a huge motivator for people to avoid situations, but also there's this, I don't want to be stupid. So rather than ask a question like, hey, Rita, these numbers don't add up, and she was very good at making people feel stupid, you won't ask that question again. The finances were so overly complex, nobody could understand them, but she did that on purpose. She did it on purpose so that people wouldn't keep asking her questions about it. So, it's something that, as I watched the film, after we went through the process of filming it, and I sat back and I watched the film and kind of processed what was there, the thing that jumped out to me was the feeling dumb, right? Because we're all professionals, and we want to be seen as smart, and we want to be seen as savvy. And we don't always ask those questions that we feel that we should already know the answer to, or people think that we should already know the answer to. So that was one of the big things that stood out for me. And that's something that we talk about a lot when we deal with corporate audiences. There's no such thing as a dumb question, right? You hear that all the time. If you don't know, then you don't know. It's not an indictment of who you are as a person. It's not an indictment of your intellect. If you don't know, you're probably not the only one, and there's probably a really good reason that you don't know.
Yeah, just the other day somebody said to me, well, I don't understand it, but everybody else probably does. And I said, yeah, no, they probably don't.
Probably don't, exactly.
They probably don't. So be brave, take the next step, ask the next question, be resourceful, but, feel comfortable asking questions. When do you, who do you work with? When do they usually come to you? Is it after they've had a big problem, or are companies more tuned into this kind of subtle behavioral aspect of compliance?
So I find that compliance teams usually are, right? Compliance teams are right there in it, and they see a lot of what the other members of the C-suite may not see and may not want to see. Mm-hmm. So compliance teams typically will come to us when there are two categories they fall into. One is they have a specific issue that they've been noticing that's been going on throughout the organization, something they're seeing in their culture that they want to address in a way that is not saying stop doing this, because that's never effective, but they want to pull it out in a way that allows people to digest it and then make changes. So we typically get when there's a specific problem, or when they really want to just refresh what they're doing. So we're not your full compliance service, right? We're not bringing those tools. What we're bringing is a way to very uniquely connect with your employees and get them to understand some of the issues that you're facing. So what we do typically are campaigns. We call them, ethics campaigns, right? And so these typically look like, anywhere from 6 to 9 months, where we're either focused on one particular issue or we're focused on multiple issues over the course of that campaign. And it has multiple aspects to it. So there's the mini documentary style. So our first person stories are mini documentary style. So there's usually like a 3 to 5 minute video that encapsulates some particular point. And then there are visuals, there are environmental cues that go along with it. And we also do games. We do all kinds of contests to get people from different divisions and different parts of the organization to weigh in with their thoughts. And we offer really interesting prizes. Like one company, we did a lunch with the CEO, right? And that really gets people kind of going and involved. So it really is two categories. It's folks who really want to focus on a particular issue that they're seeing throughout their organization from a cultural perspective, or they want to refresh and find a new way to present the content that they're presenting on a regular basis.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly who comes to us as well for our code of conduct or insider trading, any of our compliance suite of online trainings. It's often, hey, we've been doing the same training for a number of years. We want something different and more modern. But also compliance officers and general counsel who are saying, I know that there's behavioral science out there that we can be using here within our organization through something like an online training for Emtrain, or through the neuro network that you're talking about there in our storytelling and process. And I think that we've always thought of ourselves as one part of a platform or an opportunity for compliance programs. I don't think that, just online training or just an awareness campaign or just, top-down messaging works for any company. It has to be all of the above. And incorporating live events, as I know that you do some live events.
Yes.
As different forms of just sort of letting people know what happens to everyday people, just as you say.
Yeah, because, there's a reason why we're hooked on dramas and we're hooked on reality television, even though there's nothing real about reality television. But we want to find something that we can connect to, relate to, things that really reflect different aspects of who we are, different experiences. We want to live vicariously, and we use our storytelling very much in that way. We give you a vehicle, a vessel, an individual that you can sort of put your consciousness into and navigate through, the challenges, the triumphs. And what really backs everything that we do is something called the hero's journey, which, that's a concept that was pioneered by Joseph Campbell, a philosopher back in the 1940s, I believe. He wrote The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And what he did was he connected across culture, across millennia, the fact that stories are the way that we learn moral lessons. And it's also the way we work out our psyche. Stories allow us to work out our psyche in a way that we can't go and behave in the world, but we get to work through those things through the story experience. And there are 12 steps to that hero's journey that we build into the content that we use, starting with the point of departure or the call to action and ending with redemption, right? So we use that because in our own mind, we're all heroes in our own minds anyway. We're the heroes of our own story. And we really do, we want to be great. We want to be mighty. And we use stories as a way to show people that, you know what, even in those small situations in corporate America, you can actually be great. It's the overcoming of a difficult challenge, of an ethical dilemma, that gives you that sense of accomplishment. And you see that when you talk to folks that we've interviewed who are whistleblowers, who, for all the hardship, at the end of the day, they felt good about themselves. They felt good about who they were. They felt good about their lives when they finally made the right decision and they saw it through.
Yep. Yeah, it gives you strength and confidence
Absolutely.
once you get through it. And I think for me, it's compelling to say, hey, you want to get through it as quickly as possible. So first of all, when you're first noticing something happening, you want to step up and say something about it. You want to go and get, the help that you need. Either, Emtrain's got the Emtrained expert component of our platform. There are other, opportunities to reach out to people in legal or compliance within organizations. So how do we get people to start flagging just when something looks off,
right,
so that it doesn't get bigger and worse, and that you don't get into the ethical dilemmas? And then once you're in the ethical dilemma, how do you encourage employees to kind of work through that quickly to come to a quick resolution? And that really is, making that one call, writing that one letter, whatever it is that folks need to do in order to say, hey, something's not right here. And they may not even know exactly what's not right.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the behaviors that we want to drive. And that's why it's so important to help people see through the storytelling that we do in our workplace videos and that you do in your first person videos. Like, at some point, we all know the ending of the
Absolutely.
How do we make it end faster so that we're not in the really uncomfortable emotional space of managing the dilemma?
Right. So true.
Yeah. I am curious to know a little bit more around the work that you do in companies where, maybe you've got a compliance team that's really interested in taking this new step behaviorally, working through storytelling, but maybe there are others in the organization who aren't as open to it. You mentioned one story about a town hall that was sort of an exemplary of the tensions that exist within an organization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, as working with organizations, there are different people with different perspectives, and the views can diverge, right? So, one example of a challenge that we sort of faced and we had to learn to work through at the beginning of a campaign we were doing for a company. We did a live town hall, and I led a 90-minute session where I presented one of our stories that was very relevant to what this company was going through. And it got the audience jazzed up. I mean, they were on fire. Now, this company was also under a corporate integrity agreement, so they'd had some real problems, right? They had some real issues. And so the audience was really jazzed up about what I was talking about as it related to how you handle these situations. How do you blow the whistle? How do you do it quietly? How do you stop it from even getting to the point where you need to blow the whistle, right? And it was rapid fire. At the end of the 90-minute session, one of the executives came up on stage and she thanked me and she talked about how interesting and how enjoyable that was. And then she turned to the audience and she said, now we don't want you all running out and blowing the whistle, right? And it just completely undermined what I had presented and what the audience had experienced during that 90-minute session, because it tamped down and made it very clear that that's maybe not the right direction that you should be going in, even though that's what we just talked about. So there are those times, thankfully, they're few and far between, when sometimes the priorities of the company don't align with the priorities of the compliance team, the priorities of the overall betterment of the organization.
Yeah, for sure. We sometimes will note that when you do more education around ethics and compliance or sexual harassment prevention, which we do a lot of too, and people become more aware of what's okay and what's not okay and what the laws are, you will actually see more people saying, hey, I think something's not quite right here. You might get more complaints. Right. Some people who are measuring by the numbers, if we have an increase in complaints, it means I've done my job badly, won't get the bigger picture of the things are happening there anyway. It's the effectiveness of the training or the program that's bringing those things to light so that you can manage them from a risk perspective within the organization. And I feel like sometimes that's not so clear to folks.
It's not always clear. And we have a customer. I think they have 20,000 global employees. Wow. And when we first started with them, we did a presentation to their executive management team. And one of the executive management team members said, well, we only get about 3 or 4 calls to our ethics hotline a year. So I think we're fine. And I'm like, Yeah, that's not what that means.
No, exactly.
You've got 20,000 people. If you're only getting 3 to 4 calls, the answer isn't that everybody's doing everything by the book. The answer is that people either aren't aware of why they should be calling, or they don't think you care, or we can go through a number of reasons, but it's not that everything is fine. So people do often measure whether or not they're doing a good or bad job based on the number of calls, and that's not the right metric.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think we also flag that for folks and say, those numbers don't sound right. And we do a lot of other social polling, culture survey type questions embedded in our course. And so oftentimes we're starting to see those leading indicators of risk by the variety of questions that we ask within our training. But also we can really observe whether your organizational norms of behavior are set in a way that people tend to get away with bad behavior. People tend not to ask those questions, right? So the way things really work around here is different from what the company is saying in terms of top values.
Absolutely. And we talk about that a lot with our customers when we first go in. There are the rules, sort of the stated ways that things are supposed to work. And then there are the way that things really work. Mm-hmm. And you see it oftentimes with the way people are trained to do their jobs. Like, no, that's what the book says, but we do it this way. And so one of the things that we talk about is how shortcuts short circuit the rules, and how shortcuts short circuit internal controls, right? We spend a lot of time on internal controls and the things that can short circuit them. And it's often that not formally stated culture that leads to those things. So we spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah. So we do too. We're starting to measure it, which is an exciting development for us to be able to look at an array of questions, an array of measurements, an array of indicators. And a lot of what we're doing now is driven off of the Department of Justice and the questions that they're asking companies if they have measured or observed certain things about employees. We can do that within our training, and then we can aggregate the data and do some benchmarking to see where healthier companies are doing and what they're doing, and then where sort of the least healthy companies are, and maybe the things that they are missing or the opportunities that they have to improve.
Outstanding.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be really thinking about moving the needle, using the neuroscience and the behavioral science that we understand to be true, making things a little bit more fun and engaging for employees. And then, like you say, helping them to have the situation themselves so that when it happens to them, they already know the best next steps to come to a quick resolution, avoid all the drama, and reach out to their legal and compliance friends for help.
Absolutely. And then, like you just hit on the point about things being fun and engaging, I tell our customers all the time, nobody ever learned anything that was boring.
Yeah.
And they certainly didn't retain it. That's not the way the brain works. It's not the way learning works. And we know these things. And we know that children are the best learners because learning is so fun to them. It's all new. And when it comes to us as adults, first of all, we feel time limited in every single thing that we do. And so we don't have time, quote unquote, to learn anything new. So if you're going to put something in front of your employees that they have to do, right? This is mandatory training. If you're going to put something in front of them they have to do, you need to make the effort to make sure that it's engaging. And you need to make the effort to make sure that it's novel in some way, because novelty is what sticks in our brain. You can take the same, time-worn message and make it novel. It requires effort. But it's important that if you want to see the behavior change, you've got to give people something that will pass through that filter that we all develop as adults, and can actually make it through to our subconscious. It can make it through and stick, and it'll be a part of our operating system from that point forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for sharing with us today. Thanks for being a partner in sort of the ecosystem of compliance training, helping support healthier workplace cultures and create these behavior changes that we know can happen. So fun to get to talk to you today. People can find you at Helios. What's the website again?
HeliosDigital.com.
Okay, thank you. People can find Emtrain at emtrain.com or here on LinkedIn. Thank you to everyone for joining us today for our Always Learning session, and have a safe and engaging rest of the week.
Thank you so much for having me, Laraine.
Thank you.